This is number one. I mean, this was made 2 years ago. That was probably when I first had the idea of doing 60 pieces to celebrate being 60. And this was from the orchard of some old friends. They were pruning some massive apple trees that had been left for years and were overgrown. So I took a piece of apple, from a trunk about that big, and that's the piece that I made. And it was from a really interesting part of the tree that had lots of branches. You can see it's really intricate. It took ages. Not days, not hours, but weeks. There was probably the main stem, and then this would have been a branch that way, and that would have been a branch that way. So where the concentric rings are, because I've followed the annual rings, are where, there would have been branches there. That would have been the main stem of the tree. So that's what takes the time, is the intricacy around little things like that. That probably took the longest time of the little spheres. So that's number one, apple sphere. So these are from offcuts from various jobs. This was a prototype for some work that we did for the South Downs National Park. So that's supposed to be reminiscent of the Downs, and I've just followed the annual rings there. But because it's being shaped, the lines get pushed around, sort of like topography. You don't need there to be much happening for it to be interesting once you start pushing, undulating the surface. So that's number two. Number three is this one. What we've done is we've stamped them with AJC 2025. So that is a piece of wood that was an offcut from the sphere, pike shoot sphere, that's got lots of these little sea creatures in it, which are really detailed. I mean, you could just put that on your wall or have it on a surface, but it's a memory of a massive tree, just a little nod to the tree. Yeah, that's 4, so similar thing, but a different part of the tree. And the interesting thing about that, you see how the square has gone into like a rhomboid shape, trapezoid, because these were made from green oak, so that was made from dry seasoned oak, so it hasn't moved, whereas these have gone a bit mad with the shrinkage. That is 5. And that has got a little bit of a, if you see, it's got a little bit of a dish to it, which changes the shadows slightly, so it just makes it, puts another layer of interest. Change of scale for 6 and 7. So these are 2 seats, which are scorched oak, but before we scorched them, we have split them with an axe and wedges and made them split along the natural. So we put the wedge in where it was already starting to split. But this is a really interesting split because this is what's called a ring shake on the tree, which is actually a bad thing. You don't really want a tree with a ring shake because that's where it's going to degrade and rot from. But to get it to split with that ring shake, sort of split first towards the heart and then take that weak point, took a lot of power down on the wedges, and then getting it to actually split apart. I'll just show you the inside. So this is really interesting, this one. Can you see that knot there? So it's like negative and positive. The actual it managed to split apart without completely ripping that off. So you see it's continuing to move, how it's splitting. So that would fit back together, you know, quite snugly. And then that one we've split with where the natural split into the centre would have been. This has got two centres. You see there are annual rings there and annual rings there, so it makes quite a nice pattern with the charring on the top. And that's been scrubbed back when it's been charred to get all the loose charcoaly bits off, and then sealed with linseed oil. So these are seats or side tables or just sculptural, but they were from two beam sections that were made from a tree that stood on this plot on the woodcarver's studio. Yeah, so the grain runs through those three. So you can see where we've followed these medullary rays, they kind of join up on that set of three. And then this set of three, you can see clearly with that, this is a good example where you can see the annual rings around what would have been a branch coming out of the tree there. So on that seat part of it, and then it clearly matches up to that side. So that's all just there. You know, we've cut away, on those ones we've cut a section off in a flat plane, but on these we introduced a little curve just to get that more subtle graduation of light and shade. So what I've tried to do with this 60 is do things that I know what's going to happen, but also some of it put myself out of my comfort zone and just try mix it up a bit. These were a complete experiment. So they're from very green oak, and they've been cut from the log, not straight on, but at 45 degrees to the grain. So that's why we get cracks in interesting directions on them. And these areas that I've taken out follow the annual rings on each one. So this one follows the annual rings that start around the heart and then they go around. That would have been a branch, or the other way around, that's the heart, and that would have been a branch coming out. So I've just followed the annual ring authentically and then taken out. And yeah, that one I suppose is more obvious that that would have been the main stem and this a branch coming out. So that little detail is, well, they're potential branches, these little tiny knots that are within the tree, and they don't just appear out of nowhere, they grow from the heart. So that sort of pushes the annual rings around. That's why you get like this ripple effect, because it's not just occurred where it's growing, it then has a kind of knock-on effect to its surroundings. We're up to 18 now. That's a little potential knot, and look what an effect it's had. Rippling through, what would that be, 15 years, something like that. And it didn't become a branch, you know, it was a potential branch, but it didn't make it. Well, there's a massive indicator there of which direction the heart of the tree was, because this is sapwood here, which you get before the bark. So the edge of the tree would have been after that. This is the heartwood, but it was a huge tree. You know, the centre wouldn't have been here, it would have been up there somewhere. So these are the annual rings. So this was not that long ago, actually, in the tree's life. If this was like the most recent years, this was only like 15 years ago, something like that. But it was a really interesting tree because it had loads of little potential branches that just didn't make it. Number 19 is this little walnut sphere. So that's made from English walnut and from an offcut from a tree that grew in Kate's mum's garden, and it was a tree that spanned the boundary from my mum's garden into the neighbours. Eventually it had to come down, and this is one of the little bits. Yeah, so it's been oiled and waxed. That has no centre in it, so that was to one side of the heart of the tree. We try not to sand anything really, so that the cut surface is much better, cleaner than a sanded surface. 20 is massive, well, compared to the walnut sphere. So this is number 20, and this has an interesting story because this was, it looks like the nose of a rocket or something like that. If I pull it out, this is charred, and it was for a particular job, and it was like the whole length of the trunk, and this was one end, and we decided it was going to be too narrow, not wide enough. So we started again on a different log, and this piece got put under cover for years, you know, nothing happening with it. And then when this exhibition was coming, I thought, oh right, maybe we can use part of it and make it into something completely different. And this, it's got some lovely knots on it, and because of the scorching, they've shrunk and cracked, and then we scrubbed it back, so it's actually quite soft, it's not sharp. Yeah, so that you can see there, can you see that's a heart, that's a heart, and that's a heart, because they've got their little star cracking from them. They've got their own annual rings there, there and there, and at some point then the annual ring takes in all three, so it just continues around the whole lot.